When we imagine Auschwitz, most of us picture the same things. The trains arriving and families being separated on the ramp. But there is a part of the story that almost never gets told. Inside the death camp, a group of Jewish prisoners were forced to operate the gas chambers and crematoria themselves. What happened next is one of the lesser-known chapters in the history of Auschwitz. Over more than a year, these prisoners built an underground resistance. They staged the only armed revolt in the history of Auschwitz. Today, we're looking at who the Sonderkommando were, how they planned an uprising inside Auschwitz, and what happened on October 7th, 1944. Welcome back to Dark Realities, and before we go any further, I want to be clear about this. This video discusses Auschwitz, the gas chambers, and mass murder inside the camp, so viewer discretion is strongly advised. When a transport arrived at Birkenau, the SS conducted a selection. Anyone who didn't look fit for labor were sent directly to the gas chambers. The Sonderkommando were the ones who led them there. These inmates helped the arrivals undress, advising them to remember which hook held their clothes. The guards promised that tea was waiting after the shower. This is when the heavy metal door sealed shut. An SS officer dropped a canister of Zyklon B through a hatch in the ceiling. The pellets hit the air and turned into hydrogen cyanide gas. Inside the chamber, everyone has started to panic. People tried clawing at the door. Decades later, survivors would describe how the victims were always found piled near the one exit that would never open. About 30 minutes later, an SS man in a gas mask opened the door, and the Sonderkommando went in. The men pulled the bodies apart, separating family members who had died holding on to each other. After the chamber floor was cleaned, gold teeth were extracted from the mouths of the dead, and hair was cut from the women's heads. Then the prisoners carried the bodies to the crematorium, where they were loaded into the ovens. Sometimes the bodies of their own wives, their own parents, their own children. One of the survivors from Sonderkommando was once asked if he ever told prisoners the truth about where they were going. Leon Cohen's response is one of the most devastating things ever said about Auschwitz. He said, "Are you out of your mind? How could I tell people that they were about to be murdered? The people were doomed to die and we couldn't do a thing about it." And here's the part that I think is hardest to sit with. The Sonderkommando knew they themselves were temporary. Every few months, the SS would liquidate the entire unit, murder everyone, and replace them with new arrivals. They stole paper, pencils, bottles, and cans from those who died. At night in the barracks, they wrote by candlelight to record names, dates, and the number of people murdered each day. They described the process in precise detail, and then buried the manuscripts in the earth around the crematoria. One of them was a man named Zalman Gradowski. He was deported from the Grodno ghetto in December of 1942, with his mother, his father, his wife. His whole family was sent to the gas chambers. He was sent to the Sonderkommando. Gradowski had always been a young man with literary talent, and strangely enough, in the hell of Auschwitz, a writer was born. His testimony begins with a line that stands among the most devastating sentences ever written about the Holocaust. From the heart of hell, he wrote, "It may be that these very lines I am writing, will be the only witnesses to what was my life, but I will be happy if my writings reach you, free citizen of the world. Perhaps a spark of my inner fire will ignite in you, and you will fulfill at least a part of our life's desire. You shall avenge our deaths." The Sonderkommando also buried cans of ashes. The men cremated their own relatives separately, away from the anonymous mass, and buried their remains in cans with names, dates of birth, dates of murder. They said Kaddish over them, the Jewish prayer for the dead. Afterward, one of them asked, "Now who'll say Kaddish for us?" In August of 1944, thousands of Hungarian Jews were being murdered every day. The Polish underground resistance outside the camp demanded photographic evidence of what was happening. A camera was smuggled into the camp. The photographs are commonly attributed to Alberto Herrera, a Greek Jewish prisoner and former naval officer. His fellow prisoners called him Alex. 4 photographs, the only visual record of the gas chambers in operation. They were blurred, tilted, and frantic, and shot from a doorway and through trees, while the photographer hid from SS guards. One shows women being herded toward the gas chamber. Another shows bodies burning in an open-air pit. The film was smuggled out in a tube of toothpaste. The Sonderkommando had documented the crime, but around the same time they also began to plan something else, the destruction of the factory that committed it. For more than a year, the group had been in contact with the Polish underground. During soup distribution runs, the men traded valuables found in the luggage of the dead for weapons and intelligence. They even bribed guards to allow them into the women's section under the guise of romantic visits. They were wrong. The plan required explosives, and for that, the resistance turned to a group of young Jewish women. Rosa Robota was 21 years old. She had grown up in Cieszanów, a small town north of Warsaw, where she joined a Zionist youth movement. In November of 1942, she was deported to Auschwitz with her entire family. Everyone except Rosa was murdered in the gas chambers. She was assigned to the clothing detail at Birkenau, sorting through the garments of murdered prisoners. And it was there, among the clothes of the dead, that she became the central link in the gunpowder smuggling operation. The gunpowder came from the Union munitions factory within the Auschwitz complex. 3 young women, Alla Gardner, Regina Saphir-Stein, and Esther Weisblum, worked in the section that produced explosives. Esther's sister, Anna Haleman, was also in the camp. She would survive to testify about what happened. Day after day for more than 6 months, the women stole gunpowder, 1 to 3 teaspoons at a time. They wrapped it in scraps of cloth or paper. They hid it in the hems of their dresses and rubbed the black powder onto their bodies and walked past the SS guards at the daily inspections. Every single day they did this. Every single day was a death sentence if they were caught. Once the gunpowder reached the camp, Rosa Robota collected it and passed it to the Sonderkommando. The men buried it in small caches around the crematoria. The group was building an arsenal under the floorboards of a death factory. The Sonderkommando also made their own weapons. A survivor named Eliezer Eisenschmidt described his specific job. He took knives confiscated from Jewish transports, knives brought to the camp for nothing more than the Sabbath blessing over challah bread. Some had Hebrew words engraved on the handles, Le Shabbat Kodesh. Eisenschmidt honed them into bayonets, sharpened on all 4 sides. The Sonderkommando would coordinate with the broader camp resistance. The fighters planned to cut the power supply, disable the electric fences, destroy the gas chambers and crematoria, and allow thousands of prisoners to escape into the surrounding forest. It was supposed to happen in the summer of 1944, but the Polish underground kept delaying, wanting to wait until the Red Army was closer to improve the chances of survival. So the Sonderkommando waited. By September of 1944, the SS made a move. Camp authorities announced the transfer of 200 Sonderkommando prisoners to another camp. But instead of relocating them, the SS took the men to an execution site and shot them. The Sonderkommando understood the message. They were being liquidated. They set the date, October 7th, 1944. The night before the uprising, things were already falling apart. Otto Moll, the SS officer in charge of the crematoria, and by all accounts a genuinely sadistic man, grew suspicious of the prisoners' behavior. He dragged Yakov Kaminski, one of the leaders of the Sonderkommando resistance, outside and began to interrogate him. Kaminski gave him nothing. Moll shot him on the spot. The next day, the prisoners planned to attack at 2 in the afternoon, but at 1 o'clock the SS initiated a roll call at Crematorium 4. They started reading out the numbers of 100 men who would be transported. The Sonderkommando didn't wait. The men charged the SS guards with knives, hammers, and iron poles. Several SS men were beaten to the ground. Other prisoners rushed into Crematorium 4 and set it on fire. The gunpowder that Rosa Robota had passed to them over all those months ignited. The building crumbled. Some prisoners ran for the fence, cutting through the barbed wire and fleeing into the forest. 3 SS men were dead, 12 more were wounded. Across the camp at Crematorium 2, prisoners saw the flames and thought the full uprising was underway. The resistance fighters attacked their guards. One German overseer was forced into the active crematorium. The inmates killed 2 more SS men, cut the wire, and escaped, eventually reaching the village of Rajsko, roughly 3 miles away, where they hid in a granary. The SS tracked the escapees. When soldiers found the granary, they set it on fire, and no one trapped inside survived the flames. Those who escaped into the woods near Crematorium 4 fought a running battle with the SS until they were killed. Around 250 prisoners died in the uprising itself. The SS shot another 200 in the hours after the revolt was crushed. But Crematorium 4 was gone. It was never rebuilt. Zalman Grodowski is believed to have been killed in the fighting on October 7th. His manuscripts survived him, hidden in the earth. The SS launched an investigation, quickly tracing the explosives back to their own munitions factory before arresting the women. Rosa Robota was taken to Block 11, the death block, the infamous torture bunker of the Gestapo in Auschwitz I. For weeks, the Gestapo subjected her to brutal interrogations. They tortured her, demanding she name the others in the underground network. She gave them nothing. Before her execution, a fellow resistance member named Noah Zabeldeutsch managed to visit her cell. Decades later, he described what he saw, and I want to read this exactly as he said it, because I don't think there's a better way to put it. I entered Rosa's cell. On the cold concrete floor lay a figure looking like a bundle of worn-out clothes. At the sound of the door opening, she turned to face me. I almost didn't recognize her. Her eyes stayed the same. They looked gloomy and sad. Moments passed before a heavy sigh broke out from her heart. She told him I did not tell. She passed him a note for the remaining members of the underground. It said, "Be strong and courageous." On January 6, 1945, Rosa Robota, Alla Gertner, Regina Safferstein, and Esther Weitzblum, 4 young Jewish women, were hanged in front of the entire camp. The other prisoners were forced to watch. Rosa Robota's final word before the sentence was carried out was revenge, or it was be strong and courageous. It was January 6, 1945. The camp would be liberated 21 days later. After liberation, the manuscripts buried around the crematoria began to surface. Among them were the writings of Zalman Grodowski, later published under the title From the Heart of Hell. The 4 photographs survived too. They had already been smuggled out of Auschwitz during the war. Rosa Robota and the women who smuggled the gunpowder were gone. It was the largest revolt and escape attempt in the history of Auschwitz. The SS had forced the Sonderkommando to erase every trace of the dead. In the end, they left behind evidence the SS could not erase. Thank you for watching. This is an incredibly heavy piece of history, but it's one that deserves to be remembered. Please consider subscribing, and I'll see you in the next one.